You know that feeling when your computer is just acting up, like the software is glitching, everything is running incredibly
Well,
slow?
yeah, the whole system just feels completely overwhelmed.
Right. And so to fix it, you go out and you buy a brand new, incredibly expensive, high definition monitor.
Which is, I mean, that's just an absurd solution.
It makes no sense.
Right, because the screen looks spectacular, sure, but the internal system is still crashing.
Yeah.
Like, you've addressed the surface while completely ignoring the actual operating system.
Exactly. It is totally illogical when we are talking about computers. But when it comes to our own lives, that is the exact troubleshooting method most of us
Oh,
use.
for sure. We do it all the time.
We feel burnt out, we feel overwhelmed by like academic pressure or professional demands, and we try to fix that internal crash by upgrading our external hardware,
Right, we chase a new job title or, a nicer car, maybe a bigger house.
assuming that will somehow just magically fix the internal glitch.
And then we are inevitably so surprised when the burnout returns because we're looking for an internal solution in the external world.
Totally. Well, welcome to this deep dive. If you are listening right now, if you are that busy professional or the student buried under academic pressure, the person trying to balance a high-stress career while the emails just keep piling up, this conversation is tailored entirely for you.
It really is.
Today, we're pulling some really crucial insights from a series of extensive conversations between the Dalai Lama and Western psychiatrist Dr. Howard C. Cutler.
Yeah, which were published as The Art of Happiness.
Right. And our mission today is to decode the biological and psychological difference between, healthy ambition and toxic materialism.
And more importantly, we're going to break down how to systematically train your mind to sustain a genuine baseline of peace amidst the daily grind.
Yes. So, setting the stage here, the core premise that Cutler and the Dalai Lama established early on is that every single human shares one fundamental drive.
Right, which is moving toward happiness and away from suffering.
Simple as that.
Exactly. Whether you are an executive in a high-rise or a student in a library, the goal is identical. But the problem is, well, our conditioning.
Yeah, we have been trained by modern society to pursue that universal goal using methods that are, quite frankly, biologically and psychologically guaranteed to fail.
Guaranteed.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can actually rewire our stress responses, we have to look at why our current methods are failing in the first place.
Right. And Cutler frames this as a fundamental clash between the Western rationalist approach to the brain and the Buddhist approach to the mind.
How so?
Well, Cutler recounts this specific conversation the Dalai Lama had with researchers at a major university medical school. And the Western scientific baseline often operates on the assumption that everything must be accounted for externally.
Right, measurable stuff.
Exactly. These doctors explain that thoughts and feelings are simply the result of chemical reactions in the brain. They viewed it as a strict one-way street. Your physical biology dictates your mental state.
So, under that paradigm, if you are feeling anxious or stressed or just deeply unhappy, it is strictly a hardware issue.
Yes, just a chemical imbalance to be medicated or managed.
Wow. But the Dalai Lama pushed back on that, right?
He fundamentally challenged that one-way street. He asked the doctors a very simple question. He said, is it possible to conceive the reverse sequence where the thought gives rise to the chemical events in the brain?
That is such a huge shift. How do they react?
Well, the scientists hesitated, ultimately admitting their entire paradigm assumed thoughts were solely the products of physical brain matter,
Yeah.
like that they hadn't seriously entertained the reverse at all.
But the Buddhist perspective argues that conscious mental training can actually alter the physical hardware of the brain itself.
Exactly, and modern neuroscience has entirely validated this through the concept of neuroplasticity.
And this is where it gets incredibly practical. Because Cutler points to a landmark experiment from the National Institute of Mental Health to prove this mechanism, the finger tapping one.
Yeah, the mechanics of this study are brilliant. Researchers took subjects and had them perform a very simple, repetitive finger tapping exercise daily for 4 weeks.
Just tapping their fingers.
Just tapping. But when they looked at the MRI scans later, the specific area of the motor cortex involved in that movement had physically expanded.
That is wild.
Right? By actively practicing the movement, the brain recruited new nerve cells and forged new neural connections. So the adult brain is not a static piece of hardware, it is highly malleable.
Meaning that, Learning and actively practicing new ways of thinking literally rewires your physical brain structure.
Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Exactly. So if you are a high achiever trying to cure your exhaustion by, say, upgrading your office space, you are relying on that external fix.
Which won't work long term.
Right. Neuroplasticity is the ultimate proof that your mind isn't just a byproduct of your brain, it is the tool you use to shape it.
Which naturally leads to the problem of our environment.
Right.
Because if external upgrades don't rewire our baseline for joy, why is our entire economy and culture built on the relentless pursuit of the next big thing?
That is the big question.
To answer that, we have to examine the actual nature of human desire.
Well, let's get into desire, because in the professional and academic worlds, ambition isn't a flaw, right? It is the engine.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you can't just drop all desire, check out, and expect to hit your rent or pass your finals.
No, and the Dalai Lama is very pragmatic about this. He does not claim all desire is inherently negative. Actually, he divides desire into two distinct categories.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, there are positive desires.
Yeah.
These are rooted in our essential human needs. The drive to secure food, clothing, shelter.
Basics.
Right. But it also includes the overarching desire for a happy life or wanting to contribute to a harmonious society. These are reasonable, biologically sound desires that actually lead to fulfillment.
Okay, but let's be real here for a second. If someone hands me a massive year-end bonus tomorrow, or if I finally buy that luxury car I've wanted for a decade, I am going to be absolutely thrilled.
Sure you are.
That tangible success feels incredibly good. So are we really saying that kind of ambition is toxic?
What's fascinating here is that it's not toxic in its intent, but it is toxic in its long-term psychological effect.
How so?
Well, the feeling of elation you experience when you get that bonus is entirely real. The dopamine hits your system and you feel fantastic. But the problem lies in a psychological mechanism called hedonic adaptation.
Meaning, basically, we just get used to things.
Exactly. It operates a lot like building up a tolerance to caffeine. Think about your very first cup of coffee. It gives you a massive jolt of energy.
Yeah, you feel invincible.
But if you drink 3 cups a day for a year, that same single cup barely gets you to baseline normal. Your receptors downregulate. And the exact same thing happens with wealth and success.
That makes a lot of sense.
Cutler actually interviewed a nurse who experienced the ultimate windfall. She got in early on a healthcare startup. The company was bought out, and she suddenly had massive stock options.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she retired at 32, bought a huge house, traveled the world. She achieved the absolute peak of external upgrades.
Literally the dream scenario for half the workforce.
And yet, when Cutler followed up with her later, she admitted that after the initial thrill faded, her life just felt incredibly normal again.
No way.
Yeah, she explicitly told him she wasn't actually any happier than she was before the money. That is hedonic adaptation in action. Our brains are designed to register changes in our environment, not absolute conditions.
So once the new car or the new salary becomes the everyday environment, the dopamine response just flattens out.
Right, and our happiness migrates right back to our original baseline.
That completely exposes the danger of the second type of desire the Dalai Lama warns about, which is excessive materialism.
It's a trap.
Right. Greed is dangerous not because it's morally wrong, but because it is literally a bottomless pit. If the chemical high of acquisition is guaranteed to wear off, you are trapped on a treadmill. You immediately need a bigger bonus just to feel that same level of satisfaction.
You are fighting your own biology. And eventually, you hit a ceiling. You reach the limit of what you can acquire or achieve, and when the dopamine stops flowing, the withdrawal manifests as deep frustration and depression.
So what's the way out?
The Dalai Lama argues the only logical antidote to this cycle isn't obtaining the object of your desire, is cultivating internal contentment. If your internal baseline is secure, external acquisitions become bonuses, not life support systems.
But if the external environment isn't what sets our happiness baseline, we have to figure out what does. Like, how does a mind actually measure whether we are doing well or failing?
Right. And Cutler pinpoints a very specific cognitive habit responsible for our misery, which is the comparing mind.
Ah, the comparing mind.
Yeah. Because our brains rely on relative perception rather than absolute conditions, we are constantly measuring our success against external benchmarks. And usually, those benchmarks are the people around us.
Right. Like, if you are a student and you score an 85 on a brutal exam, you might feel incredibly proud.
Until you look around.
Exactly. The moment you find out the person sitting right next to you scored a 95, that pride instantly turns into inadequacy. Nothing about your actual achievement changed, only your point of comparison.
Cutler gives this mind-blowing example of professional athletes. You have individuals making a $2 million salary to play a game, and they are bitterly complaining to the press about feeling disrespected.
To the average person, complaining about $2 million sounds absolutely insane.
Completely. But they're miserable because a teammate is making $3 million. The comparing mind completely overrides objective reality.
Upward comparison, basically. Constantly looking at people who are richer, smarter, or more conventional successful.
Which is a guaranteed recipe for chronic envy.
Mm.
But the Dalai Lama suggests we can actually hack this mechanism. We can reverse engineer the comparing mind to work for us by consciously shifting our perspective to appreciate our existing assets.
And there's a really powerful example in the research about the late actor Christopher Reeve. Following a devastating horse riding accident, he was left completely paralyzed from the neck down, relying on a mechanical ventilator just to breathe.
Which is a catastrophic loss of physical autonomy.
Beyond catastrophic. And Reeve was very honest about the initial despair. He talked about experiencing intense pangs of jealousy, just hearing a friend say, "I'm going to run upstairs for a second."
Because he couldn't do that simple thing anymore.
Right. But he realized that letting his comparing mind dwell on his physical deficits was going to destroy him, so he actively forced a cognitive shift.
How did he do that?
He chose to focus intensely on the fact that the accident had spared his brain. He still had his intellect, his memory, and his ability to communicate. By intentionally comparing his situation to the alternative, which was severe brain damage, he replaced toxic envy with profound gratitude.
Wow.
And he went on to direct films and become a massive advocate for spinal cord research.
That is such a vivid testament to neuroplasticity and cognitive reframing. And for you listening right now, the researchers actually designed a specific exercise to train this exact mental muscle. It comes from a study conducted at the State University of New York at Buffalo.
Oh, the downward comparison study.
Exactly. We naturally default to comparing upward. We say things like, "I wish I had that corner office," or "I wish I had their trust fund."
Yeah.
And unsurprisingly, the researchers found that completing those sentences left subjects feeling terrible.
Shocker. So the researchers decided to test the inverse, right? They asked subjects to actively compare downward.
Yes.
So let's actually do this right now. Take 5 seconds and complete this sentence for yourself. I'm glad I'm not.
Right, maybe it's, "I'm glad I'm not dealing with the chronic illness my neighbor has," or "I'm glad I'm not still working under that toxic manager I had 5 years ago."
The researchers found that repeating, "I'm glad I'm not a sway block," just 5 times created a distinct, immediate spike in the subject's reported life satisfaction. It forces your brain to recognize the baseline stability you currently take for granted.
But this is where we have to be careful. Because shifting your perspective using an exercise like that isn't just a fun life hack you do once.
Right, it's not a one-and-done deal.
No. If you are operating in a high-pressure environment, maintaining a calm baseline requires rigorous daily maintenance. Remember, you're trying to forge new neural pathways. It requires athletic-level repetition.
Which is the hardest part. Like, intellectualizing a perspective shift while listening to a deep dive is easy.
Sure it is.
Accessing that calm when your inbox is exploding and your deadline was an hour ago is a completely different challenge. So how do we actually operationalize this? Give us the specific steps.
The Dalai Lama provides a surprisingly structured daily protocol for this. And it begins the exact moment you wake up. Before the email, before the news, you establish a sincere, positive intention for the day.
Like a mental primer.
Exactly. You actively think, "I am going to utilize this day to be of benefit, or at least to not cause harm. I will not waste this day." You prime the cognitive pump. Then, the crucial second half happens right before sleep.
The review phase.
Yes. You conduct a mental review. You check your actual behavior against your morning intention. If you held your temper during a stressful meeting, you actively rejoice in that success. You give your brain a positive reinforcement hit.
And if you failed?
If you failed, you honestly critique yourself and express regret, but importantly, without spiraling into self-loathing. It is a daily, dispassionate feedback loop of accountability.
I love that because it removes the vague mysticism and makes it a tangible practice.
Very tangible.
And this practice becomes incredibly relevant when we talk about the specific pressures students and young professionals face. Because Cutler notes a dangerous flaw in how modern society views education. We treat knowledge strictly as a weapon.
We really do.
We go to school to become more clever, to outsmart the competition, to, secure the bag.
But the Dalai Lama argues that when intelligence is decoupled from compassion, when we only train the intellect and completely ignore the heart, that intelligence actually becomes destructive.
It creates those cutthroat, hyper-competitive environments.
Exactly, the ones that generate all our burnout. True knowledge should be used to develop internal discipline and genuine care for others.
And a major byproduct of that hyper-competitive environment is performance anxiety. The absolute terror of failing an exam, bombing a presentation, or just looking foolish in front of a board of
Well,
directors.
it's paralyzing.
But the Dalai Lama shared his own personal strategy for pre-performance anxiety, and it completely shifts the paradigm. He admits that even he, as a global spiritual leader, occasionally feels a spike of nerves before speaking to massive arenas.
Which is a very human response.
Yeah. But his antidote to that anxiety is brilliant in its simplicity. He intentionally grounds himself in sincere motivation.
Meaning what, exactly?
He reminds himself that his singular aim is to be of benefit to the audience. He isn't there to prove how brilliant he is. He decides in advance that if someone asks a question he doesn't know, he will simply admit he doesn't know. By entirely dropping the pretense, he removes the fuel for anxiety.
Why? So what does this all mean for the listener?
Well, think about the mechanics of it. If your underlying motivation for a presentation is genuinely just to share helpful information to the best of your current ability, there is no ego on the line.
Right.
You completely lose the fear of looking foolish because you weren't trying to show off in the first place. Sincerity acts as an armor against performance anxiety.
Sincere motivation protects your own peace of mind, sure. But to actually sustain that calm over a lifetime, you have to push beyond your own isolated experience.
You have to connect with others.
Yes. That brings us to one of the most thoroughly researched yet misunderstood concepts in this material: compassion.
Yeah, I think a lot of hard-charging professionals hear the word compassion and instantly dismiss it as, soft, sentimental weakness.
Which is completely wrong. The research Cutler presents proves compassion is a biological powerhouse. It is literally an evolutionary advantage.
There was that Harvard study, right?
Yes, fascinating study out of Harvard University. Researchers had college students simply watch a documentary film about Mother Teresa tending to the sick and impoverished in Calcutta. The students didn't do anything but watch the film and feel a sense of compassion.
And what happened?
Researchers then analyzed the students' saliva and found a massive documented spike in immunoglobulin A, which is an antibody that fights off respiratory infections.
That's crazy. I want to break down why that happens biologically. Because when you are hyper-focused on your own stress, your autonomic nervous system is locked in fight or flight mode.
Right.
Your body pumps out cortisol, which actively suppresses your immune system. But when you experience compassion, your brain registers social connection, cortisol drops, the inflammation response lowers, and your immune system, no longer suppressed, surges back online. Altruism literally fortifies your biology.
It's amazing. And there is another massive study from the University of Michigan that tracked individuals over a decade. They found that people who engaged in regular volunteer work dramatically increased their life expectancy and overall vitality.
They called it the helper's calm, right?
Exactly, the helper's calm. Compassion isn't just a nice moral idea. It is a profound biological regulator.
And to actively build this biological resilience, the Dalai Lama introduces an advanced meditative practice called Tonglen.
Yes, which translates to giving and receiving.
Yeah.
And it is an intense psychological exercise. It's essentially a form of cognitive exposure therapy.
Walk us through it.
So in the Tonglen meditation, you sit quietly and visualize two distinct groups. On one side, you visualize people who are experiencing severe suffering, poverty, illness, profound grief.
Okay.
On the other side, you visualize a version of yourself that is entirely self-obsessed, indifferent, and focused only on personal gain. You exist as the observer in the middle.
Which immediately forces you to confront the ugliest parts of your own ego.
Exactly. Then the active visualization begins. You focus on the suffering group. As you slowly breathe in, you imagine taking all of their pain, their struggles, and their desperation onto yourself.
Wait, breathing in the bad stuff?
Yes. You visualize this suffering as a heavy, dark smoke or a poisonous substance. You breathe it directly into your own chest, visualizing that dark smoke completely destroying the selfish, egocentric version of yourself.
Wow.
Then as you exhale, you mentally give away your own joy, your success, your wealth, and your resources to those suffering people, visualizing them, experiencing total relief.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I think anyone listening right now recognizes the absolute paradox of this practice.
Oh, it's totally counterintuitive.
As stressed out professionals, our baseline instinct is self-preservation. We want to build massive walls to keep the world's problems out so we can just survive our own day. The idea of intentionally visualizing taking in more suffering sounds completely counterproductive.
It flies directly in the face of Western individualism.
But the psychological mechanism behind it is genius. By actively choosing to breathe in that dark energy, you are doing exposure therapy on your own avoidance. You are confronting the very things you fear: loss, pain, failure.
Right.
And in doing so, you destroy the illusion that you are separate from the rest of humanity. You realize that your narrow, ego-driven anxiety simply cannot survive when exposed to universal human connection.
And the Dalai Lama points out that if you feel a deep sense of discomfort or resistance when first trying Tonglen, that is actually a sign the practice is working.
It means you hit a nerve.
Exactly. It means you are directly striking at the deeply ingrained selfishness that generates so much of your daily anxiety and isolation.
So when we pull all these threads together, the core insight of the art of happiness becomes undeniable. True, sustainable joy is not an external prize. You cannot fix your internal hardware glitch by chasing a shinier external environment.
You really can't.
Happiness is an internal muscle. By actively recognizing the trap of hedonic adaptation, by managing your comparing mind, by setting a sincere daily intention to block performance anxiety, and by practicing rigorous compassion like Tonglen, you can fundamentally alter the neuroplasticity of your brain.
But the crucial final reminder from the Dalai Lama is that this requires immense patience. Inner transformation does not happen overnight. You are attempting to overwrite decades of cultural conditioning and establish neural pathways.
It's a heavy lift.
It requires the consistency and discipline of training for a marathon. You build this new baseline centimeter by centimeter, day by day.
Centimeter by centimeter. So, to bring this right into your life today, I want to leave you with a final thought experiment.
Let's hear it.
Tomorrow, whether you are in the office, the lab, or the lecture hall, you are going to encounter that one specific person who constantly irritates you.
We all have one.
The person who challenges your ego, spikes your blood pressure, or makes you feel entirely inadequate. What would happen if, just for tomorrow, instead of viewing them as an obstacle to your success, you reframed them as your own personal trainer for patience and tolerance?
I love that.
What if the greatest annoyances in your daily life are actually the exact heavyweights you need to build the muscle of your own mind? Because if peace is truly an inside job, then every point of friction in your day isn't a crisis. It is simply another opportunity to rewrite your code.